Is this a Roman portrait or an Egyptian portrait? Would you categorize this as ancient Roman or ancient Egyptian? Welcome back to our series on ancient Roman art. This is the last video of 3. If you haven't seen the first 2, go check those out, in which I discuss the period of the Roman Republic, and we look specifically at some early Roman architectural innovations, as well as what is known as Republican verism, that is, depicting the truth of age and the wisdom of the patrician class. In the second video, we look at the Augustus of Prima Porta, and we look at how Romans depicted power through sculpture and architecture as the empire expands. So what happens in the period of late empire? I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Debin, and I'm an art historian, and this is Art Trippin Lecture Series. Hi, I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Debin, and this is Art Trippin. In this video, I'm going to talk about Roman mummy painting, which is both a Roman and an Egyptian art form. So sometimes when I'm teaching this, I'm like, do I introduce this when I teach Egyptian art, or do I introduce this when I'm teaching Roman art? And I usually keep it in the section on Roman art. As the Roman Empire is expanding, we will see that Egypt becomes a province of the Roman Empire in 30 BCE. But the Egyptian people continue to bury their dead, as we have seen. The only change is that we see the introduction of Roman-style painted portraits on wood that are actually replacing the portrait masks that would have been used before. When you look at an Egyptian mummy portrait, you can see, of course, especially in the case of the pharaohs, a very stylized and abstracted depiction that doesn't look like a specific person. It doesn't look like an individualized portrait. But as Roman culture is influencing Egyptian culture, we start to see Roman-style, veristic, realistic portraits painted on these mummies. So this is encaustic, which is an ancient painting technique that is a mix of hot beeswax and pigment. So you grind up the color into a powder and you heat up beeswax and mix it together, which means you have to paint very quickly because as the beeswax dries, the pigment dries. This particular mummy portrait comes from the Fayum cemetery in modern day Egypt. And in fact, this Fayum district is where hundreds of these mummy portraits were found. And you can see that they're depicted in a very naturalistic way. It's very realistic. Like, this looks like a real guy. He is an Egyptian man, but he's really dressed in Roman fashion with this kind of white little toga and this star headdress or headband. So we really see this mixing of Roman style portraits on Egyptian mummies. Now remember, this is really reserved for the elite individuals of Egypto-Roman society. Probably everyday people did not have enough money to pay for something like this. But here we really see an Egyptian kind of dressed as a Roman, and this exemplifies some of that cultural mixing that we see happening in the period of late empire. Now, by the way, these Roman mummy portraits, like the face would be a traditional Roman style portrait, but the rest of the sarcophagus would be covered in Egyptian imagery, depictions of Egyptian deities, Egyptian hieroglyphs. So really it is a fusing of 2 different styles, the Roman style and the Egyptian style. And this is something that we'll see in the period of late empire. It might also make you think of ancient Greek art during the Hellenistic period, where we also have this mixing of different cultures and different styles coming together. Now, as we move through the period of late empire, let's look at this portrait of Constantine. This is the head of Constantine, one of the late emperors of Rome. This is from the Basilica Nova in Rome, and it's dated to 315 to 330 CE. This huge statue, this is just the head of a giant statue. Just the head. This is 8 foot 6 inches tall. Like, this is huge. Who was Constantine? Constantine was the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. And in fact, he rendered it first legal and then made it the official religion of the Roman Empire. Yes, I am referring to the 313 CE Edict of Milan. When we look at this statue, remember, this is just a piece of a huge statue. So imagine the whole body. The idea is that this sculpture was really meant to completely overwhelm the viewer. And it reflects a kind of return to a classical style, kind of that Augustinian classicism. The face is relatively smooth. The lips are slightly parted. His hair frames his face very neatly. He's sort of like also eternally 30, like Augustus was in the Prima Porta statue. But he's different from Augustus in that Constantine is sort of looking off into the heavens here. He's got these really large eyes and this kind of cashew-shaped pupil carved out at the top of the eyeball. And he's sort of looking up into the heavens. So we see a kind of mixing of an idealizing, like we see in the Augustus of Prima Porta, but also some of that individualism and the individual features that are depicted here in this portrait of Constantine. And this statue was originally intended for the Basilica Nova, which began under Maxentius and was completed by Constantine. And it sits on the Sacred Way, not far from the Arch of Titus, but it's not really a full and complete building anymore. So all we can do is sort of look at cutaway view of this building, but you can see that this statue of Constantine would have been placed in the apse. This is sort of a rounded area at the end of a long rectangular structure. The layout of the building actually comes from the baths. So I'm thinking of the baths of Caracalla or some of these other ancient Roman baths. So the layout with these 3 arches is pretty typical bath design. And it really shows that the Romans were capable of taking one form of architecture and like introducing it into a different context. We have a central nave, a long rectangular building. We have an apse on one end with this curved edge. And we have a cross vault of the basilica with these large windows on the 2nd story that allow light and air to move through the building. And this building, not just this specific building, the Basilica Nova, but this type of building, the basilica itself, was actually the model for what is shortly coming. We're in 306, 312 CE. Constantine has made Christianity not only legal in the Roman Empire, but eventually the official religion of the Roman Empire. And what is coming is this period known as late antiquity or the early Christian period, when we see the spread of Christian ideals and, of course, related to this, Christian art and architecture throughout Europe. So if you want to know more about what happens in this period of late antiquity, stay tuned to our next video on the period of late antiquity and early Christian art. If you liked this video, please comment below. Let us know what you liked. Let us know what you want to hear more about. And don't forget to subscribe to Arttrippin here on YouTube. You can also check out Arttrippin on TikTok and Arttrippin with Prof D on Instagram. As always, I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Debin, and this has been Arttrippin, the lecture series.